Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the hidden economics behind the artificial intelligence systems we all use, literally, every single day. We're looking at a truly fascinating breakdown of Codatta and this concept they call provable ancestry in the AI knowledge economy. If you've ever wondered how the massive oceans of data powering AI are sourced, valued, and ultimately accounted for, or, well, more accurately, how they're completely not accounted for, you are in the exact right place. We're going to break down exactly how modern data extraction works, and more importantly, how it's about to fundamentally change.
Think about it. It's kind of the central mystery of the modern AI era. Every single AI model, every commercial app that reaches millions of users rests on countless, invisible human contributions. We're talking about the labels applied to images, the meticulous corrections to generated text, the careful annotations on complex datasets. But in almost every system operating today, the exact moment those human contributions are ingested into the machine, the origin just disappears. The humans who actually made the magic possible, they simply vanish from the story. Section 1. The Disappearing Human and Invisible Influence. Okay, let's dive right into this. To figure out how we fix this massive blind spot, we first have to understand the systemic problem of how data origins disappear in the first place.
Let's look at how this builds across the modern AI pipeline. It's a multi-layered process. You start at step 1, where a single dataset is created, right? And that often contains millions of individual human contributions. That dataset then influences step 2, a foundational model. That model then shapes step 3, a derivative dataset. And finally, that derivative dataset powers step 4, the actual commercial product. Maybe it's a recommendation engine, a compliance tool, or a generative AI app. But notice the immense gap between step 1 and step 4. The downstream value generated all the way at the product level has completely detached from the upstream human effort at the dataset level. The link is entirely invisible.
Which brings us to a really crucial concept: structural extraction. Now, it is incredibly important to note that this extraction isn't some intentional villainous plot by tech companies. Actually, it's a technical failure. Traditional data systems just don't have the mechanisms to preserve lineage at that kind of scale. When data is ingested, it gets normalized, tokenized, transformed over and over again. And because of this, tracing attribution becomes technically messy and, frankly, economically inconvenient. The result is this systemic detachment of value from effort.
So, what are the actual consequences of this technical failure? Well, they're pretty severe. Contributors are rewarded exactly once, if they're lucky enough to be rewarded at all. Your influence cannot be traced, meaning the massive downstream value created by your initial data completely detaches from your hard work. But the absolute most critical point here is that last one. Without data, lineage, incentives simply cannot compound. And if incentives cannot compound, building a sustainable knowledge economy is flat out impossible.
Section 2. Introducing Provable Ancestry. So, how exactly do we fix a system that's structurally built to forget? Well, we fix it by engineering a system that's forced to remember. Enter Codatta's solution.
This is Codatta's deceptively simple yet totally transformative concept, provable ancestry. We aren't talking about magic here. We are talking about hard infrastructure. Provable ancestry is cryptographically enforced, verifiable, and immutable. It captures the relationship every single time a dataset feeds a model. When that model creates derivative data, the ancestry extends. When that derivative powers a product, the chain stays fully intact. You don't have to rely on trust, and you don't have to rely on corporate storytelling. The proof is mathematically baked right in.
So how do they actually pull this off? They use a really powerful three-pillared approach. Under Codatta, every dataset is versioned, it is fingerprint verified, and its lineage is recorded. Versioned, verified, recorded. It is an unbroken chain. If your work materially improved the final product, there's finally a structural, undeniable way to prove it. Section 3. Dynamic incentives and behavior shifts. All right, now that we have the infrastructure to actually prove where data comes from, what happens next? The economics of the whole AI ecosystem begin to shift.
We are finally moving away from the outdated past of static attribution. Getting your name buried in the footnotes of some academic paper, or getting a tiny one-time payout for labeling 1,000 images. Instead, we're moving into Codatta's economically meaningful future, dynamic incentives. Think of it kind of like music royalties, but for data. Because your data's influence is observable, the system can use version tracking and usage logging to actually map revenue. This allows for deterministic royalty engines. So if your dataset powers a revenue-generating product 3 steps down the chain, the system automatically records that influence and distributes the rewards right back to you.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the human psychology aspect. When you are only paid once, your incentives are completely misaligned with quality. In traditional systems, contributors optimize for quick completion. They do the absolute bare minimum for compliance, just to get that short-term payout. They just want to get it done and get paid, because the system literally doesn't care how good the data is 5 years from now.
But the second you introduce provable ancestry, behavior radically shifts. When contributors know their work will compound over time, they suddenly aim for high-quality inputs. They want to build durable, well-structured datasets with long-term usability. And why is that? Because a brilliantly structured dataset has a way higher probability of downstream reuse. And in a lineage-preserving system, reuse generates ongoing value. You're basically turning a one-off gig into a long-term investment.
Section 4. The compounding knowledge economy. This idea of investment really brings us to the overarching economic vision Codatta is building. We are moving from a gig economy into a compounding knowledge economy.
Let's just walk through this cycle to see how human labor stops being so ephemeral. Step 1, you make a contribution. Step 2, it gets integrated into a model. Step 3, it sees downstream reuse. Step 4, that reuse creates derivative value in an actual product. And Step 5, because of provable ancestry, that value loops right back into incentive distribution for you. Your effort structurally accumulates value over time.
I absolutely have to share this quote directly from the source material, because it just perfectly crystallizes the whole concept. Finance teaches us the power of compounding. Codatta applies the same principle to knowledge. Contributors build portfolios of influence rather than isolated task histories. Think about that for a second. You aren't just logging hours anymore. You are building a portfolio of influence. Your data becomes a compounding asset.
But wait, beyond just paying contributors fairly, this infrastructure solves massive headaches for the tech companies themselves. Right now, organizations are facing a huge crisis of trust, having to answer these exact questions. Where did the training data actually come from? Was consent granted? Were IP rights respected? Were the original contributors even compensated? In a system that forgets, answering these questions is an absolute legal nightmare.
Codatta's lineage architecture provides trust through traceability. All of a sudden, compliance becomes entirely auditable. If there's a copyright claim, disputes become instantly resolvable just by checking the immutable ledger. Ethical sourcing becomes 100% verifiable. This lineage isn't just a nice-to-have fairness initiative for data labelers, it is core operational resilience for the AI platforms themselves.
Section 5. An economy that remembers. Which brings us to the ultimate paradigm shift of this whole explainer.
Without data lineage, humans are basically just inputs, data fodder for the machine. But with lineage, contributors become true economic actors. Your work persists, it evolves, it influences downstream systems, and it earns over time. Value no longer leaks entirely to the final product. It actually flows backward along the entire chain of creation. It creates a genuinely people-centered knowledge economy.
And it really all boils down to this one fundamental philosophy. Most digital systems forget. Codatta remembers. I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. In an increasingly AI-driven economy, can we really afford to build infrastructure that forgets who laid the foundation? Remembering who built the tools is not optional anymore. It's the very infrastructure required to make AI sustainable. And infrastructure that remembers is infrastructure that lasts. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this completely changes how you look at the data powering the tools you use every single day. Catch you next time.